Roll for Crit is made possible thanks to the support of viewers like you and our patrons on our Patreon page.
You can become a patron for just $1 a month at patreon.com/rollforcrit.
In this Roll for Crit review, we join Riot Games in their world of Runeterra, where throughout the land there's a game played called Tellstones. And while each culture has their own small variations on it, we'll be taking a look at Demasia's version, which is also known as King's Gambit. In this game, you will have stones with symbols on them, and you'll be placing them on a board trying to outwit your opponent while also remembering where each stone is placed.
One stone will begin the game on the mat in the center, making up the line face up, while the rest start out in the pool. And your first set of actions you can take involves instructing your opponent to manipulate them in some way. So you could say, I want you to place the flag stone into the line from the pool onto either the left or right side. You can't put stones in between other stones. They must go onto one of the far ends. You could also have them swap two of the stones in the center with each other, or you could have them hide one of the stones by flipping it face down. This is because you're going to want to try to make it more difficult for your opponent to remember exactly where things are placed, and that will come into play eventually if you decide to challenge your opponent. You can challenge them to name one of the stones of your choice that is face down, and if they are able to do so, they will gain a point. If they are unable to do so, you will gain a point. Another option that you have is to peek at one of the face-down stones. You get the opportunity to secretly look at one of them, so you'll get a reminder of what it is, but your opponent doesn't. You also get a big advantage on this action if your opponent happened to score a point on their last turn, say by being challenged and correctly naming what the stone was. Then when you take the peek action, you get to look at 3 of those stones of your choice instead of just 1. So that gives you a really big advantage moving forward.
Of course, you can go all in with the boast action. What this action entails is you saying that you know every face down stone in the line. Now, you will say you know this, and your opponent has 3 options. A, they can say, I believe you, and you simply get a point. B, they can call you in your bluff and say, I don't believe you, prove it, in which you must then name every face down stone, then reveal all of them. If you were right, you win the game. If you were wrong, you lose the game. So this is an all or nothing proposition. But there is a third option for your opponent. They can say, I don't care, I know them too, in which they throw it right back at you, and you must decide whether you believe them or if you make them prove it. You can't throw it back after that. You will be forced to have only 2 options, not that third one. Once someone has scored 3 points or successfully failed or completed a boast, the game ends, and that person is the winner of Tellstones King's Gambit.
This is Riot Games' second physical tabletop board game following Mechs vs. Minions, whereas both of them are based in League of Legends lore and theming. That one was a big ordeal, a lot of little minis, a campaign you could progress through. Tellstones is a very small box, a very small number of pieces. It's just a very simple 2-player game that will last you maybe 10 minutes to play around, could be even less depending on how risky the players are at the table and how much they want to go for it. And it's all about bluffing, well, I guess not bluffing, but trying to read your opponent, trying to figure out what do they know, how can I make it really complicated for them, but not so complicated that I also forget what's going on.
It's also suggested in the rule books that usually when playing this game, you try to also have some small chat that try to throw off your opponent. So maybe you ask about the weather and how things are going, so they forget that the crown was actually on the left instead of the right. So weird ways to try to trip up your opponent. But in the end, this is a big game about memory. It's trying to remember where pieces are and thinking about what swaps would throw people off because the symbols are similar. And all the symbols, by the way, are easy things to remember. It's nothing weird like, oh, this is actually Sith handwriting or something. Like, nope, that's a hammer. You know, it's
to be clear, we know that Sith aren't from League of Legends.
Right. I just chose Star Wars is on the mind. You know,
I'm just trying to get ahead of the comments on this one.
Yes. I did play some League of Legends, so I have a little knowledge on the lore.
Yeah, I mean, and I like that. The idea behind this game and the lore is that this is the kind of thing they'd be playing in a tavern or a pub or what have you. And, you'd have, I'm imagining sort of the way like Gwent is in The Witcher, that you'd have tournaments and contests or like Liar's Dice kind of a thing for a real world comparison. And I think it feels that way. It does a good job getting that feeling across that this is the sort of light thing like Liar's Dice or even something like a blackjack or poker style of game that's meant to be played. You've probably got a drink in one hand. It's a test of wits between two players and memory again. But it's very, very simple, nothing too complicated. But I think there's a challenge in it. And while it seems very simple at first, and maybe it is, if you have a really good memory, maybe you just breeze through this game every time. But I definitely found some points where I would get tripped up and forget, wait, what exactly was that? I'm second guessing myself. And there are some fun head games of maybe you do want to bluff and say, I know them all, but you don't actually know them all. And if maybe your opponent thinks you know them all and they'll give you the points, or maybe they don't. And, that kind of thing is in there. So it's very simple, very straightforward, but I think there's just enough stuff there to engage your mind that it makes it an interesting game. It's not just a simple party trick, something you display on a shelf. You could play this, I think, and have a fun time as a filler game.
The game itself, I think, like you said, with Gwent or Liar's Dice, it's one of those, it was definitely designed to be almost like that. I don't want to say prop exactly, but it's like, like to make the world more living. This is something they do around there. And it does feel like one of those things that would be in a bar. Though this booklet, I think 2 pages are for rules, but the rest goes on this explanation of how it's used by generals to make official decisions if there's an argument. But in the pubs, they have an alternate playing method for teams and stuff. And if you fail to remember some of these symbols, like the knight's supposed to represent loyalty to the crown or something, they really wanted to make sure this felt like it's something that exists in the game. And you could sort of see it too with, like, this is a heavy thing. This isn't like some cheap plastic disc kind of stuff. Like this makes sense as something someone might carry around, like probably more of the nobles. I'm sure like they just use carved pieces of wood in the bars and stuff, but like it feels like they tried to make it feel like something that would exist, not the quick cardboard cutouts we may have been used to from properties in the early 90s.
Yeah, there aren't that many components, so they make the ones that are in there look and feel nice and weighty. It is interesting, I could be wrong on this, but it seems like they invented this game for the board game. Like this wasn't a thing referenced in League of Legends before this?
To my knowledge, I have not played in a long time, but I don't remember this ever coming up too much with the characters. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. It feels like it's nothing too crazy. So it makes sense it could be something like that. And it is interesting that they mentioned in the beginning how the game is Tellstones, but it has small varieties depending on the culture. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see, like, this is the Demacia one. I wouldn't be surprised to see different symbols, like a reskin one for the other kingdoms. The Noxus, that's the other kingdom that really hates Demacia. Their symbols are different. Maybe they have a different rule of, like, if you can't, you can actually knock someone out if they can't remember the spider stone or something like that. So that could be another way to sort of add small variations and make this a bit more of a collector's items for people who love League of Legends. It definitely seems like that kind of thing. Like if you enjoy and like, I love all the Demacia heroes, this has got to be the version I want. I don't know how you feel about that, since outside of the card game, have you ever done any League of Legends?
And Mechs versus Minions I've played, right. But no, I've never experienced the actual video game. Not really my style of thing, but I think the art is fun and the lore is cool. And, I enjoyed what little, again, I feel like, there's not a lot of theme in terms of the gameplay, but knowing that backstory, I do get the essence that I think they were going for with this game.
Crits and misses for Tellstones, King's Gambit.
Crits. This is a simple memory game, but there are enough choices and player interaction to make it more engaging than most games of that genre.
Most memory games are more solo experiences and seeing who can memorize the board better than the other person. Adding that player interaction and trying to trick your opponents with either small talk or swapping tiles adds that extra little bit that one would need for older audiences.
It's a small package, but they put a lot of effort into making the components look and feel good, and because it's small, you can take it with you. It's easy to set up and play wherever you are.
This does not feel like a quick cash grab. The box is a nice metal with the stones having a nice heft to them that I can imagine that Garen himself playing this game. Misses. This game was designed to be a game existing in another world, so if you don't really know anything about the world of Runeterra and League of Legends, I don't know how much you'll be interested in this. It is a fun, light little memory game, but without the connection, you may find this to be boring and not worth your time. I feel we're seeing more often these games that existed in a property that are now being brought into the real world. Usually it was written in a story, I think we can see with 4D chess from Star Trek or the chess from the Star Wars Millennium Falcon.
Or Game of Thrones has also their Sivas.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's versions of that out there.
But I think like Gwent and definitely this game, we're seeing more often when they're like, what game would they play in the world, and sort of designed the reverse way. Instead of trying to make a game from something you see in the show, they try to make a game that would fit in that world. And that helps a lot because usually the rules make more sense. Like this game, it's simple, but it's understandable. None of the symbols are weird language. It's like, yeah, this is the scales. This is a sword. It's a quick memory game. I could see people in a bar playing this, and I could see people in an actual bar playing this. This looks like it's small enough that you could take with you, and I think it'd actually be pretty nice too because you won't be as worried about spilling anything because there's really no paper.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, it's perfect for that. I really think it is a perfect little filler game for 2 players. If you have a 2-player game night and you're just, you want something quick in between matches of something heavier, or maybe you get really into it. I mean, probably if you play this a ton of times, I feel like the meta will only go so far, and at a certain point it'll just be like, all right, I'm just really good at remembering the 6 or 7 stones or whatever, and you'll probably get tired of it at some point. But for what it is, and especially as a collector's item, if you're into the theme and everything, I think it does exactly what it sets out to do. And as someone personally who, like we said, doesn't really have an attachment to League of Legends, I still had fun with it. I still thought it was entertaining, and I would definitely be up to throw it on the table now and again because it's so quick and easy. There's not really a downside to me playing it.
Like you said, I think that's the big thing. It's going to be probably a fun, quick game, but even after you've hit the point where like you can play it so well it's boring, it's still probably a good sort of set piece or like talking point that you'll have on the shelf. Well, let us know if you've had the chance to play King's Gambit or if you're interested. You can let us know in those comments down below. And also, like I said earlier in the video, would you like a different version of the game? Because like I said, King's Gambit is the Demacian version. Is there a different kingdom or world you'd like to see have their own version with slight tweaked rules? You can let us know in those comments down below. Until then, I'm Will.
I'm Jonathan.
And this is Roll for Crit.
Hey, go ahead, like and subscribe, and support our Patreon for even more board game content.
Support us now to hear the audio expansion, where you can hear all the other nerdy things we've been up to.